Okay, all right. So thanks for joining, everyone. Warm welcome to all of you. So this is going to be how to crack MyCat session. I'll be talking about what MyCat has been like in the past few years, what has been the changes last year, because there were quite a few changes, especially in the last year's context. From 4 options, it suddenly became 8 options in some questions and all of that. So there are some elements which have remained constant throughout these years, and there are some things that have changed. So we're going to talk about all of those aspects of MyCat. Okay, so let's get started with the session. So when you look at MICA as an institute, the selection process that they follow, it has 3 steps in it. The first is, of course, the written test. So that is going to be the CAT, XAT, GMAT. One of these tests you will have to take mandatorily. And in addition to that, you have to take the MyCat. So you have to have either a CAT or a XAT or a GMAT score. And along with that score, you mandatorily need to appear for the MyCat. Okay, so CAT, XAT, GMAT, one of those scores, at least one of them, because you can also submit multiple scores and they will take the best of them. But MyCat is like a mandatory thing. Now, with respect to MyCat, there are 2 things. You have MyCat 1 and MyCat 2. I'm assuming that most of you joined today are going to be there taking the MyCat 1. But even if you're planning to take the MyCat 2, that is completely fine. The recommendation is to take both. So take both MyCat 1 and MyCat 2. Then, of course, they're going to take the best of those scores, right? So that is why it's important, if you're a serious aspirant at MICA, that you take both MyCat 1 as well as MyCat 2. You never know on which of those you will do really well. Okay. And then, of course, once you take the MyCat and you submit your CAT, XAT, or the GMAT score, there is 50% weightage to CAT, XAT, GMAT, one of them, and the MyCat score that you get. And a combination of this gives you a composite score. So they use that to shortlist candidates for the group exercise and the interview process. So once you get shortlisted and appear for that group exercise and interview, the final selection works like this. You are going to have 20% on your either CAT, XAT, or GMAT, then 30% on the MyCat, 20% on the group exercise, and 30% on the interview, right? So that is like the selection process that you have, which means even in your final selection, 50% weightage is the written test, right? And that's going to be a combination. So for somebody, it could be XAT plus MyCat. For somebody, it could be CAT plus MyCat, and so on. Okay, so make sure that you take, of course, the MyCat 1 and MyCat 2 both, if possible. If not possible, one of them. And then CAT, XAT, or GMAT, one of the 3 scores you will have to submit. Okay, 50% weightage in shortlisting is on that CAT, XAT, GMAT, 50% on MyCat. And that is why it is very important for you to score well across these exams, right? The higher you score, the higher is your chance of getting into the institute. Okay. So there's a question that I have got in the Q&A, and the question is, what is a good score on the CAT? So the thing is, MyCat or MICA has never revealed the final composite scores of the students, right? So we don't know what is like a very good score. But then what we typically have seen is that people, even at 85 to 90 range in CAT, have been able to get calls from MICA. So I've had students in the past at 86 percentile, 87 percentile, and of course the MyCat score, because that is still 50% in terms of deciding whether you will get a shortlist or not. So CAT is just one component of it. That's 50%. Now, if you, let's say, have a slightly lower score on the CAT, how do you compensate for that? You can compensate for it through a higher MyCat score. So that is something that you need to keep in mind, that if, let's say, one exam I don't do that well, let me compensate on the other exam, right? So let me try to do as nicely as I can on that and get as high a score as possible. Okay, so there's no particular number that they have given, because again, they look at it, they look for everybody's scores and they will put it as a relative assessment. So we don't know what a good score will be like, and that is going to change from year to year too. You are not going to have like a same cutoff every single year, and that is why you take a shot at it and you see if things work out, right? But in the past, we have seen people who have got reasonable scores on the MyCat have been able to get a call at, say, 85, 86, 87 as well. And of course, there could be people at lower percentiles in CAT getting a call from MICA because their MyCat scores are on the higher side. Okay, so that is something that you can consider. Can you submit both CAT and XAT score? Absolutely, you can submit both of them. That's also an option that you have. They are going to select, of course, one of them and the best of the scores that you submit. So let's say you've taken both CAT and XAT, you can submit both of those scores. Okay. So, all right, let's move to the test structure now. And test structure is something that has changed from last year, right? So last year was like the first, or even the year prior to that, because of the pandemic, where they changed the structure. So from, because it was a longer duration test earlier. So you had 30, 25, and I think 105 minutes for the section C that is there, which has now become 80. So what you have is there are three broad sections, and within one of these sections, there are multiple questions or multiple sections rather. So we start with the psychometric test, which is the first section. So psychometric test has 150 questions to be attempted over 30 minutes, right? There's no negative marking in this. And psychometric test, I'll show you some sample questions as to how it works. But again, there's nothing right or wrong. There is no negative marking in this. This is qualifying in nature. So you have to finish all the questions, which is 150 questions. These are very instinct based questions. You just see a question, you mark the answer, and you move on, right? I'll show you some samples. But 150 to be attempted in 30 minutes. Then comes the descriptive test. So descriptive test has 4 questions in it, and you have 25 minutes to complete this part. Again, there's no negative marking. And this is where the whole creative writing aspect is going to come into picture, right? So you're going to have different set of questions. I'll show you some samples today, and a lot of details have been given in the workshop that we had done. Again, it is there on YouTube. So I've shared those links also in the chat window, but I'll just maybe paste it again for everybody. When we upload this on YouTube, we'll also put these links in the description so that all of you are able to see this. So a creative writing workshop is like almost, I think, 1 hour, 15-minute duration kind of a thing, wherein we have covered the entire aspects of the descriptive test. Right? And then you move to section C, which has 80 questions and 80 minutes. So 4 sections are there within this section C. Okay. Now you can jump between different sections in section C. So when you move to section C, if you, let's say, want to start with verbal, you can do that. From there, you can go to quant. You can do a couple of to GK, then go to quant and all of that. So within section C, you would be able to make that movement. But from section A to B to C, unless you complete that stipulated time, you'll not be able to go to another section. Okay. Once you complete a section, you cannot go back to that. So once you're done with psychometric, it's done, right? You'll not be able to go back to it. And this is where the negative marking is there. So when you look at section C, that is where you are going to have a negative marking system. All right. And when you generally people have this question that what is the cutoff of MICAT? So what is like a very good score on the MICAT, or what's like a decent score on the MICAT? See, the problem is, again, it's something that they have never revealed. It changes from year to year. But what we have observed is over these years that typically it is somewhere in the range of, if we look at the old paper where it used to be a 105 question thing on section C, out of 105, somebody has got, let's say, a score of 40, 45-ish. That is considered to be a very good score, right? So typically you can consider it to be somewhere in the range of 1/3 plus, which is like a decent score. And if you're looking at a very, very good score out of 80, we'd put it at somewhere around 35 to 40, right? That would be a very good score on the MICAT to get a shortlist, of course, also considering that you have a reasonably good CAT score as well, right? So aim should be to reach to say a 40 plus for sure, which is slightly more than 50%. But even in some cases with a higher CAT score, if you have got like a 1/3 on the MICAT, so let's say out of 80, you get maybe a 27, 28, that might just be sufficient. Okay, you never know whether it will be or not, but it might be. Okay. Best thing would be to look at somewhere around 50%, that if you are getting 50% of the paper, right, after accounting for all the negatives, etc., I think that's a very good place to be in. Right. So your aim in all MICATs that you take should be to reach to a score which is equal to or more than 50% of the maximum marks that are there. So in this case, out of 80, I would say aim for 40 or more. But then maybe at a 30 or a 35 also, people might be able to get calls from MICA. So let's start with now sections, right? So we'll talk about the individual sections. The first thing is psychometric test. And psychometric test, as I said, there's nothing right or wrong in it. There are 150 questions to be attempted in 30 minutes. This is qualifying in nature. So I have seen very rarely people fail in this, but I've seen people failing. Okay, I have seen people who have not been able to clear the psychometric test. That can happen if, let's say, one, you are not able to complete it. You're supposed to complete the entire thing. Two, if you try to judge or think too much and answer the questions, right? Because sometimes what happens is people try to manipulate the responses. They try to answer in a certain way, which they think is, let's say, a politically correct way, etc. But instead, you just have to think, okay, what is it? What is you are as a person, and stay close to that, stay true to that, right? So try to answer as close to what your actual nature is as possible, rather than overthinking about the questions that are there. So last year, of course, this has a Likert scale. So the questions that you see are of two types. There are some questions that are true, false. There are some questions that have a totally disagree to totally agree scale. So when you go to any restaurants or any hotels, etc., you typically have like a feedback form that they give you at the end, right? So where they will ask about service and all of that, and you will see that there's a Likert scale. So the scale is like totally disagree, strongly disagree, somewhat disagree, disagree, agree, and that kind of a thing, right? So it's ranging from one extreme to another extreme. So you have to figure out sort of where your response lies for a particular question. And just to give you some samples, for example, there's this thing which says, in discussions, I like to get straight to the point, right? Now, totally disagree or totally agree. So you have to fill one of those circles that is there. And I enjoy the drama and excitement of a crisis situation. I find it difficult to produce ideas on impulse and so on. Then there are true false questions, right? It could be situation based. So for example, even the same question that you have here on screen now, in discussions, I like to get straight to the point. I can ask it as a true false question too. Okay. So be ready for both kinds of questions, because you're most likely going to see both of them, 8 option Likert scale, as well as the true false questions that are there. Okay. Be very, very quick, because if you do the math, you're essentially looking at 5 questions per minute, right? So you see a question, you think for it for some time and just make a choice, right? That's how you're supposed to approach this part. Now, what are the tips to crack this? As I said, it's just a qualifier in nature. I think in my all these years, I've seen maybe one person, because I know that person, and who could not clear the psychometric test. And it's very, very rare that people will not be able to clear it. Okay? So don't be quick. Don't try to overthink. They're just personality-based questions, and you have to stay true to who you are, and don't try to answer in a particular manner. So people think that, okay, they just have to answer everything to be in the positive sense, right? It may or may not reflect your true personality. That remember that there are no right or wrong answers. Okay, so just stay true to who you are, and you should be fine. And once you take the mock test, you're going to get a lot of practice. Plus, as I said, the workshop that we had done, I have given some links in that workshop, as well as to the places from where you can do a couple of psychometric tests, which are free, and anybody can take those, right? So this is just to give you a practice. It's not going to be exactly similar to what you have on the MyCat, but those free practice tests are going to give you a nice overview of what you are as a person. So have a look at those. I think it will be beneficial to everybody. So let's now move to section B, right, which is the descriptive test. And this is one of the most challenging areas. And also I will take you through what is the order in which they assess all of these things, right? So whether they look at the psychometric first, or the descriptive, or the aptitude, and all of that. So we'll be talking about those things in a while. But for now, let's talk about the descriptive test. Okay. Can you share the link once again? Yeah, sure. I've put it on the chat window. I hope all of you are able to get it. Yeah, this workshop is there on YouTube, so anybody can access it. Okay, I hope people have got the link in the chat window. Oh, all right. Got it. I think the setting was slightly off, so let me just put it again. Yeah, I hope people would have received it now. Okay. All right. I'll also share a link to the MyCat form filling guidelines. So we have two useful videos. One is this workshop that I had done, and then the form filling guidelines. So make sure that all of you have a look at this. Okay. All right. So let's start with the descriptive test. Right. Now, when you look at or think of what descriptive test is, it is essentially to test your writing, right? So it is checking not how flowery your language is, but whether are you able to make sense, right? So analytical and descriptive writing ability and creative skills of the test takers. So the answers have to be typed. Please keep that in mind. And I have seen in all these years of following MyCat and talking to students, etc. I've myself appeared for MyCat earlier, and what I've observed is that a lot of times people are not able to complete this. It's unfortunate that a lot of people are not able to complete, and the reason being they try to make one particular answer perfect, and they just sit on it for a long time. So you have to think of it this way, that you have just about 25 minutes to complete this, right? I think I forgot to sort of change it there, but this is 25 minutes that you have to complete this part. So if you have 25 minutes to complete 4 questions, you have to type fast. And that is a practice that you will need, right? So make sure that you practice typing on a regular basis. So at least try to type for maybe 10, 15 minutes per day, right? It could just be any paragraph that you have open on one side, and just try to type it out, right? But just try to write something on your own as well. That is something that is always going to be helpful. So the answers have to be typed using the keyboard in 25 minutes. Okay, let me just make that correction, that it's 25 minutes and not 30 minutes. Now, what kind of topics are there, right? So there are 4 questions in this particular test. The first 3 questions are essentially on a particular topic, and you don't have option. You have only one topic that is given to you. So this is a topic from 21 MyCat, last year's MyCat. So it says cultural diversity is celebrated while individual efforts are made to assimilate the differences into the mainstream. Then why should we desire diversity? So the fundamental question is, why should we desire diversity? Now, the first question that you have to write is 3 points for the topic. So you have to say, okay, we should desire diversity for X, Y, Z reasons. Right? Then the second part of it says, write 3 points against the topic. Right? It has the same amount of marks. So write 3 points against the topic, meaning why should we not have diversity? Right? So I remember my MyCat that I had taken, I think 2019 or 2020, one of those years. And there was a topic which says, how can laziness be used in a good manner, and something like that. Right? So something related to laziness, that was the topic. So 3 points for the topic, and how can laziness be used in good sense. 3 points against the topic as to why people should not be lazy and all of that. And the question 3 here, for example, is suggest steps by which a young manager can ensure creativity and innovation, keeping in mind homogeneous cohorts. In my particular test that I had taken, the topic was give ways in which a manager can use, or how an organization can use laziness to improve some productivity or some organizational output or something like that. And you have to you cannot repeat points from question 1 and 2. So when you look at question 3's answer, you cannot write the same points that you have used. Okay, it peripherally could be related, but it cannot be the exact same point. So when you have only 25 minutes and you have these 3 questions, and I haven't even started about question 4, which generally takes more time than this, because it might take, let's say, somewhere around 10 minutes. For each of these questions, you get roughly 5 minutes. That's how close it is going to be. So within 5 minutes, you have to think of what are the 3 points for the topic, 3 points against the topic, and so on. And for each of these questions, roughly 5 minutes, try to finish off typing the answer as well. Okay. It gives a word count, right? So it has a word limit, and it will also give you the word count at the top. So you'll be able to see it while you're typing it. So it's not a problem. I don't exactly remember what is the word limit, and but just you'll be able to see how many words you're writing. Okay, so don't worry about it. And then fourth question that is within this section is like the most interesting part of the test, wherein they ask you to write a story. And this story is supposed to be written with respect to some 4 pictures that they will give. So these 4 pictures, again, this is like an original question from MyCat. So there's a fire extinguisher, there is a QR code, there is a horse in an open field, and there is a mason tiling or putting bricks and so on. So you have to write a story, and you have to specify the sequence of images that you have used to create that story. For example, if these images are A, B, C, D, you have to specify that, okay, my order is going to be, say, DCBA. And when you're writing that story, you have to ensure that you stick to that sequence. So you have to write some story on it. For example, there was a fire and in a farm, and people were, people started running away. There was a horse, and there, of course, because of fire, the horse also started running away, and all of that. And of course, then they tried to sort of recreate that farm. They put a, I don't know, some sort of a fundraiser for it. There was a QR code wherein people could scan that QR code and pay money towards that fundraiser. And then finally, people started reconstructing that farm, etc. Right? So it's just a story that I created right now. So yeah, I mean, you can create anything. So you have to specify the sequence of images that you're going to use for your own story. And as I said, you have to finish writing it. So very, very important to complete the writing exercise of it. Okay. So Divya has asked a question. I think it is related to the previous slide, whether they are expecting answers in points. The answer to that is no. It's not supposed to be point 1, 2, 3, because that sometimes might become very short as well. But there's nothing right or wrong about it. Okay, so if somebody wants to write points, you can write it in the sense that, okay, there's point 1, point 2, point 3, but then make sure that you expand on that point a little bit. Okay, so don't just put it as like 1 or 2 words, because that is not going to be helpful. For example, when they say something about cultural diversity, right, why that is important. So one of the points that you might have is diversity ensures that people start appreciating others' point of view, and different views are taken into consideration, because of which there could be certain elements of a business or a decision that others might not have thought of. And because of diversity, people are now able to consider, right? So for example, let's say you have an all male board, right? Now, all male board, all of them are football fans, let's say, right? And there's no diversity. But now let's say you have a board which has some females, you have males, people from different walks of life, people who have done different things in life. Now, when they take a decision, right, they're going to think of various perspectives. So, and that's the importance of diversity. Now, you cannot write all of this, but then maybe 1 or 2 lines or 3 lines on a particular point is still fine. So it depends on how you're managing your time. So initially, I would suggest that you can write one point and then expand on it if time permits. So it's important to finish everything rather than trying to say perfect one particular answer. Viraj has asked, do the stories have to be rooted in reality, or can they explore the realm of total fantasy as well? So this is a question related to the question 4 of the descriptive test. So that story can be anything, right? A story can be complete fantasy. You can just make something up on the spot. It's not necessary that it has to be a reality based thing, right? I've covered all of these aspects in detail in that workshop that I have shared the link with you. But just to give like a very short answer at this point of time, there's no constraint. Okay, so you're free to write what you want to write, and yeah, just make sure that you write a nice story, something that people would like to read, and stick to the time limit. Just try to finish it off. Okay. What is an ideal score in the test? They've never revealed how the marking scheme works, so don't even worry about it. Don't even try to think what like a good score would be, right? Because they have, first of all, never revealed it. We know that, okay, it's 10, 10, 20, and 30 marks. But do we have a submission of a student who cleared MICA? The answer is no, right? So they have not even given like how the marking scheme works. So there's no point thinking about these things. Okay. So what are the tips to crack this, right? Now, firstly, just start writing. It's very, very important that you write something on a regular basis. Right? It's very, very crucial, because what happens is a lot of times people don't write and they suddenly go to MyCat and think that they'll be able to write. It's not going to work. If you're somebody who has a nice typing speed, it just helps you to write faster. But that doesn't mean that you'll be able to write something on the spot. So if I give you a topic right away, would you be able to write, let's say, I don't know, 500 words on it? Okay. So that's why practice writing. Take one topic per day. Just try to type it out. 10-15 minutes per day should also be sufficient. Taking random photos and trying to write something on it. So I just give you 4 things right now. Let's say I give you a water bottle. I give you a bag. I don't know. I give you aluminum, let's say, and I give you, say, a charger. Right now, there's a story that you need to craft around this. So, what kind of story would you write? So, the more you do these kind of exercises, which is spontaneous thinking, the better you will get in terms of writing stories. So, work on your typing speed. We have seen cases where people have not been able to complete the test, and instead of perfecting a particular answer, write the MVP version. Right. So, MVP is minimum viable product, which is like a good to go kind of a thing. That this is fine. This is like a basic thing. Right? So, if I want to make Maggie, for example, I'll just make it the way it's given as instructions. I can always make it fancy. I can add butter to it. I can add some, I don't know, some particular sauces to it. I can serve it with something else, whatever. But those are like extra things. But the more important thing is I need Maggie in 2 minutes. Right? So that's what you need to serve first of all, which is like the minimum viable product. Right? So make sure that you write down the individual answers very, very quickly, which are good to go. And if time permits, you can add to that. So improvise in the last 10 minutes if it is possible. It could not be, it might not be 10 minutes in most cases. Maybe 5-6 minutes are available towards the end. And what you need to focus on is, of course, your structure, clarity of thoughts, examples, and creativity. So examples are very, very important, especially in the question 1, 2, 3 context, because they help you to connect things very easy. Right? So for example, this particular question that you have. Now, if you're able to give some example from your workplace, right, that one of the topics, one of the points against the topic, for example, if you want to write something that we had a team of, let's say, 15 people coming from different walks of life, and they were not even able to arrive at a decision, right? And that is against the topic, that people are thinking in so different directions that there is no consensus that the group is able to arrive at. So that could be against. But you're giving an example from what has happened at your workplace, and people might be able to relate to that better. So examples generally work, and especially if it is from a popular context, or let's say some example of a movie or some controversy or some news article, those are something that will help. Creativity is like the is something that you can always bring to the table. But even if the answers aren't very, very creative, as long as you're completing it nicely, doing a reasonable job at it, I think you should be fine. Okay? It's not like going over the board with respect to creativity. Please make sure that you watch that workshop. I think I've given a lot of examples in it. We have talked about what are the different workflows that you can use, some of the frameworks that can be used, and so on. So make sure that you watch it. I think it will really be useful. Okay. There are a couple of questions that I'm going to take at this stage before we get into the section C of it. Let me just answer those questions for now, and then we'll move ahead. Okay, so there's a question from Rahul. How much emphasis is given on vocab and how much on the uniqueness of the story and the argument? So vocab is not very, very important. Okay? It's, if you are using simple words, that is also fine, because you're not going to have Google next to you wherein you can actually search synonyms for a particular word. And that's what a lot of authors do, by the way. Sometimes we read an article and we think that this person always wanted to use this particular word, but that is not how it works. So I was actually watching one of the videos wherein there's some writer talking about the writing process, and he has mentioned this, that a lot of times he's actually Googling words, because for a particular word, he wants to find the best word that can capture the feelings behind what he wants to convey. Right? So maybe, for example, the word could be I don't know, maybe you're scared, right? But you can be scared, you can use the word fear, you can use the word phobia, you can use something else. Which word you use at that point of time is what strikes you. So in the exam, you're not going to have a lot of time to think about the synonyms, and that's why there's no point. But just try to work out decent logical arguments for questions 1, 2, 3, and for question 4, which is the creative writing part of it, you can go all out and write whatever you want. The question from Ritika: by chance, if in one of the questions in this section we wrote only 2 points instead of 3 and else everything is fine, will they consider it or not? See, they have never revealed the marking scheme of this. Okay, so they look at it, but how they look at it, how they assess it, if you're not written 3 points, what happens? Unfortunately, nobody has answers to these questions. Okay, so what I'll simply say is you try to write 3. That's why write the 3 points first, and then if you have time, come back to it and then expand on it. But the first thing would be to write 3 points rather than writing two perfectly nice language 2 points. It's better to write 3 points. Can we use real life stories and examples? We can use movies, etc. I've written a descriptive wherein I've used Harry Potter one scene as part of my story without actually mentioning anything. See, I mean, you can take inspiration, right? As long as it is not, it is not like a blatant copy of something. It's fine. So you can always take inspiration. And I think I've mentioned this in my workshop as well that we had done. So in my creative writing part, there was something related to a bee and sort of a drone-like bee and window and all of that. So I actually wrote about that I was watching the movie Makhi, and that is like the inspiration, right? So it inspired me to do something. So there's a reference to it rather than like just making some sort of a blatant copy. So you can always use fantasy and movies and all those things, fiction, something from a song or whatever. You can use all of that. So don't worry about it. Does past academic score or work X matter? Okay, we'll come to those selection-based questions a little later. So let's start with the individual sections within section C now. So section C will first start with the divergent and convergent thinking, which is, to put it very simply, logical reasoning part of it. Right? So here you're going to get all sorts of questions related to word associations, statement assumption, which is critical reasoning, by the way, analogies, conclusion-based questions, etc. So about 6 questions out of 20 were critical reasoning last year. Then questions on visual reasoning. So what comes next in the series? What is the odd figure out? And those were 3 questions last year. Again, the distribution can change. So don't think that, oh, this is how it is going to be on MyCat 1, 2. The distribution can change, the number of options can change, anything can happen. MyCat is like one of the most unpredictable tests out there. Last year, for example, I mean, I don't remember a single aptitude test in the MBA entrance context where they have had questions with 8 options, right? And MyCat is like possibly the first one to do that, where questions had 8 options. Right? So you have to read a lot also, by the way, in the paper. And that make sure that people are not able to solve a lot of questions too. So generally we say that if out of 20 you're able to do say 10, 11, 12 questions, I think that's like a reasonable performance. Okay. Coding, there were 2 questions, questions on data sufficiency, puzzles, binary logic. Binary logic generally appears every year, so we haven't really seen it not being there on the test. So binary logic is truth tellers, liars kind of questions. So practice those, have enough examples in your mocks as well. So when you take mocks, you will realize what sort of questions are there and how do you pace yourself and what kind of questions you solve, what kind of questions you have low accuracy on. So you work on those and all of that. Okay. So out of 20 questions last year, 8 questions had 8 options, the remaining 12 had 4 options. Okay. Moving to the verbal ability, which is another 20 questions that you have, wherein surprisingly last year there were a lot of RCs. Okay. So previously we have not seen so many RCs in the VRC section. There have been instances where they've asked only 1 RC. And most of the other questions have been either grammar or close test and all of that, right? But last year there were 3 RCs. You also have roughly the words which were there on these RCs. There was 1 RC with 2 questions on it, which had 500 words, roughly 500. 2 questions on another RC, which had 200 words. And there was like a long 450 word again, which had 5 questions on it. So 3 RCs is what you had last year, but you never know. This year they might ask only 1, they might ask 2. It's all at their discretion. Then you have grammar, which is another important area. Parajumbles, 1 word substitution, and close test, which is fill in the blanks, and then word pairing. So questions aren't, and this is where vocab I think makes some difference, right? So if you have good vocab, especially people who would have, let's say, prepared for the NMAT, for example, or any other test which has vocab in it, it's always going to be useful because you'll be able to answer these questions because of this, right? So if you have strong vocab, whether it is synonyms or antonyms, those kind of questions, you'll be able to answer those. Okay, so it's not very, very important, but If you have good vocab, it will prove to be useful, because your one word substitution questions could also be related to vocab. Your close test is related to vocab. Word pair is also related to vocab. Right? So make sure that you do as much vocab as you can. Just don't go don't do overdo it also. I'll say whatever you can, just do that much. Okay. Now let's talk about the quant and the data interpretation section. Right? So quant, so DI appears as part of quant, and there were only 4 questions last year. So there was one bar graph with 4 questions on it, right? And there were questions related to arithmetic, modern math, and geometry. So previously we have seen that arithmetic tends to be the most dominant area, right? So you will have more questions from arithmetic compared to the other areas that are there. The difficulty of the questions is slightly on the higher side. So it's more like NMAT level kind of questions when you look at the quant questions that are there. Not very easy, not very difficult, somewhere in the middle. So make sure that you do your arithmetic very well. That's going to be the major area. Data interpretation is fine. It's generally not very, very difficult to solve. But then, yes, you need to have your percentages, averages, ratios, and all those things in place to be able to solve DI faster. Right? And then modern math, last year there was only 1 question, but there have been cases in the past where they have asked more questions from the P&C probability area. So though you don't see probability here, it doesn't mean that they don't ask it. They just didn't ask it last year. But previously they've asked questions on probability. In geometry, triangles, coordinate geometry, and another thing that you don't see here is trigonometry. In the past, they have asked questions on trigo as well. So there are some areas that you don't see because they didn't appear last time, but especially logarithms, numbers, probability, and trigonometry. Right? These are important areas from the MyCAT perspective. Okay, so make sure that you practice a lot of these questions, these topics that are there, and you should be good to go. And then comes the section or the part which generally everybody is scared of, which is the GK section, right? And GK section, the problem is no matter how much you do, there will be something that you'll not be able to answer. Right? So the only thing that you can hope for is out of 20, if I'm able to answer, let's say maybe 6, 7, 8 questions that I know, I think I should be fine, because there's negative marking. So you cannot take a lot of chances as well. I've done that in the past and I've suffered because of it. So one of the MyCATs that I had taken, I basically attempted everything in GK. So I knew that I didn't know a lot of it, but I still marked everything thinking that, okay, maybe a couple of them could be right. I think it was like a bad day and sort of everything went wrong. So my GK score was horrible, though I had done extremely well on the other areas. So don't take a lot of risks. I will say that if you're somewhat know, maybe you can take a risk, but otherwise don't do it. Right? So 20 questions, mix of static and GK. Last year, there were 8 static and 12 based on current affairs. The distribution can always change. There were 11 questions out of 20 related to India, 9 questions related to international affairs, and questions go across. It's not one particular area, business, history, geography, logos, something related to awards, books and authors, laws and acts, business terms, etc. It could be anything under the sun. So there's nothing like that, okay, you do this and you're done. The only thing that you can do is prepare through the GK zone, do the static GK quizzes, do the current affairs quizzes, do as much as you can, just hoping that you will get something that you'll be able to answer. And this is like one of the most difficult areas because the preparation is so exhausting. I mean, it's huge. It's not exhaustive. Right? So no matter what you do, you will always see something that you have absolutely no idea about. That's why don't overdo it. So do a reasonable job at it, but then prep wise, I don't think somebody can prepare for like a GK section in a month. Right? You will possibly need much more than that to be very, very good. But what we then recommend is you focus on the most important part. That is where the GK zone comes into picture. That you do whatever you can from that. So especially the weekly current affairs. Let's say if you have covered the last 6 months, for example, that's like a very good place to be in. Okay, so last 6 months of current affairs, if you've done, I think you should be good to go with the current affairs questions. With static GK, you never know what would be asked. So in one of the tests, I remember So there was this question, not MICAT, but some other test. How many countries participated in Miss World of that year? I mean, it's such a vague question, vague in the sense that it's like a random question. There is a specific answer to it, and that's what is there in the options. But I don't know if it is 90, if it is 108, if it is 120 or something else. Right? So there will be a lot of questions which you know or you don't, and you cannot do anything about it. Right? So at least a good question would have been, who was the Miss World that year? Of course, might have become very simple as well. But then, yeah, I mean, there will be a lot of abstract questions. So don't worry too much about it. Try to do whatever you can. So that's about it. Now, let's talk about the entire process. We have spoken about it in the beginning a bit, but how do they prepare the shortlist? The first thing is your psychometric test. And as we saw, it's a qualifier thing in nature. You have to clear it. So they'll just say, clear the psychometric. Okay. Now, those who clear the psychometric, then for these people, they're going to look at what is their CADS at GMAT score. If you don't clear the qualifier, you're out. Okay. So if you fail in the psychometric, your score will not even be considered. Okay. Then once you clear the psychometric, your CADS at GMAT score will be considered. From that CADS at GMAT pool, whoever qualifies, those who qualify based on CADS at GMAT, their section B of MyCAT will be assessed. So for CAT, they must be having like a minimum number in their mind, which they have not revealed. And they say that it is relative assessment. So they must be setting like a cutoff from all the applicants that they have got. It could be 70, it could be 75, it could be something else. So people who only clear that, they will look at their section B, which is essentially the descriptive test, the creative writing part of it. Right? Now, those who qualify on the basis of the relative performance, subject to a minimum cutoff in normalized scores of section B. So this is interesting. So what they'll do is they will evaluate everybody's descriptive test and normalize those scores, which means within all the people who have appeared and cleared the initial shortlisting process, they will figure out what are the scaled scores or the normalized scores. Essentially, they will take, let's say, whatever the top, I don't know, 300, 400, 500, 1000, whatever that number is. Okay? And then for these people, they're going to look at the section C scores. And each section they have written, this is again directly from the MICA website. Each section will have its own cutoff. So there is a sectional cutoff. Nobody knows what that sectional cutoff is. Okay, so there's no point asking people. You'll not be able to find any information on this. All right. So what we would just say that try to do well across all the sections in the hope that you'll just clear the sectional cutoff and try to maximize in the area in which you're good. For example, the time when I had taken it, I maximized my score on the quant and the logic and the verbal than the GK. Right? But your one section cannot be very, very bad. So if you get, let's say, a negative score in one section, you're more or less out. There's no way that you'll get a call. So try to stay afloat by clearing the minimum sectional cutoffs that are there. And then once all of this is done, they will prepare a composite, they'll prepare a list based on the composite score formula, 50% CADS at GMAT, 50% MyCAT. And then finally, as I've spoken, the weightage is 20 on the CADS at GMAT score, 30 on MyCAT, 20 on group exercise, 30 on interview. Okay, so that's how the entire shortlisting process works. Now let's talk about the overall prep strategy. Right. So see, when you look at the overall strategy of MyCAT, we have seen this in the discussion that we have had today, that it's not like a very predictable test. Okay, though they have given like this is what is going to be. The images that you get might be very easy for somebody to write a story about. For somebody else, it might be difficult. Right? Even on the word association, things that you see, or in the entire aptitude part of it, there could be some areas that people are good at, some areas people are not good at. Right? So it's slightly different offbeat kind of an exam. But what will only say is that you work on this, right? So you cannot really say that, okay, I'm not good at something, I'll not improve it. It's not going to work as a strategy. So make sure that you practice these areas that are unique to MyCAT, whether it is the LR part of it or the creative writing, the descriptive writing, and all of those. Then go through the current affairs, very, very important to prepare as much as you can. There's no limit to GK prep. but whatever you can do before you face the test, please try to do it. Right? Descriptive test, I've already said that you take random topics, try to write it, show it to somebody, check using Grammarly if your grammar, etc. is in place or not. And then finally taking full length papers. Right? So once you solve the mocks, you will get a sense of what my strategy should be, because adapting to the format is also challenging. So far, all of you have been taking, let's say, the CAT mocks, and you're used to a 2-hour paper. You're used to a 40-40-40 kind of format. So adapting to the MyCAT format is also going to be challenging. And that is why take the mocks. So let's say you are somebody who is planning to take both MyCATs. My recommendation is that you take 2 mocks of IMS before you face your MyCAT 1, and 3 mocks of IMS before you face MyCAT 2. Now, if you're planning to take only MyCAT 1, you have to finish all 5 mocks before you face MyCAT 1. If you're planning to take only MyCAT 2, then don't take any mocks of MyCAT right now. Take all of them in the month of December and Jan. Okay, and make sure that you finish all of them. But for those of you planning to take both MyCAT 1 and MyCAT 2, my recommendation would be to take 2 mocks of IMS before MyCAT 1 and 3 mocks, the remaining 3 mocks before MyCAT 2. Okay. On the MyCAT website also, they have given 3 sample papers. They are not complete papers. Okay. They've done a very just randomly put questions, right? So they looked at the paper, they just put it without any formatting and all of that. But nevertheless, that's like the most excellent source that you have there, right? The actual questions of MyCAT. So even in the workshop that I had done, I've used a lot of past MyCAT questions on descriptive writing and all of it. So go through all of them, try to write your own answers, show it to your mentors. And for example, your verbal mentors, right? So let's say you have taken a past MyCAT paper and you've done the descriptive writing and the creative writing part of it. Just show it to your verbal mentors and get a feedback from them on the language and the structure and the vocab and all of that. Okay? So just try to improve as much as you can. So these are those must-watch videos that I was repeatedly talking about in this session. And yeah, that's it from my side with respect to the session. I'll be very happy to take the questions that you guys have now. There's a question from Anonymous on the word count. I don't exactly remember it, but it's given. It's generally given there, and you'll be able to see how many words you're writing as you are typing. Does past academic or work experience matters? So they have never really revealed like the explicit weightages, how they look at it, let's say in the interview. So it just says 30% on the interview. I don't know how they look at the past academics or work ex, but I remember one student who didn't really have any great academics or work ex and was able to convert MyCAT. Right? So MyCAT looks at people who are able to tell MyCAT as to why they want to join the program and creative in some sense. So they look for creativity as like a very big element. Will we put this recording on YouTube? Yes, we'll do that. What about algebra? So algebra has appeared in the past, but last year they didn't ask it. That doesn't mean they'll not ask it. So you can always get questions on linear equations or quadratic equations and all of it. Where on MyCAT website can we find past year questions? It's just there on the MyCAT or the MyCAT website or the MyCAT registration page. I think somewhere it is there. I have given a link again in the chat as to how you can apply to MyCAT. I'll just maybe paste it again for everybody. So all of the papers are there. I think they also, because I did the form filling video and they keep sending reminder to complete the registration. So on that page itself, they have put those questions. What is the cutoff for ZAT? Nobody knows. What is the cutoff for CAT? Nobody knows. What's the cutoff for GMAT? Nobody knows. See, they have never revealed this particular data, right? And they will never even reveal it, because why should they, right? So, but what we have seen is 85 plus is a decent chance kind of a thing. So if you're at 85 plus in either CAT or the ZAT, I think you're good to go. Even between, I think 80, 85, people might be able to get it. See, the cutoff changes from year to year. So that's why there's no unique answer to the question that you asked. There's a question from Dhruv. I'm able to write great essays, but it does take me a lot of time. My typing speed is good. I've taken MyCat earlier, but I couldn't complete how to practice writing good essays in the given time limit. I've just joined. Okay, fine. So it's not essay, first of all. Essays generally tend to be longer, and these are very short things, right? So what I spoke about is when you look at question 1, 2, 3, which are largely point-based questions, get the points very quickly in your head, type it out like the basic version of it, then move ahead. Keep doing that and go to fourth question, finish that off. And then once you have some time left, you can fine tune your answers. So don't try to make something perfect from the first line itself. That is where the problem is, that people try to improvise as they go along. But what you first need to do is just write the basic version of it, finish that off. And then if you have scope to maybe, let's say, use some nice synonym or a good analogy for something or a quote, you can do that. But those are improvements, those are add-ons. So maybe you joined in a little late, as you said, but I had given example of Maggie, right? You can add a lot of flavors to Maggie, but the first thing is to serve Maggie in 2 minutes. If time permits, you can add a lot of things to it. Okay, I think I've answered most of the questions. There's a question from Rahul. Is humor or sarcasm or satire appreciated in the story writing, or should we try to keep it formal? See, if it is like an absolute necessity, I think you can. Some sort of like an exclamatory remark, or some sort of like a humorous idea, I think is always fine. They're going to value that as well when they evaluate it. Creative writing is always going to be something that if you are good at it, it will prove to be useful. But then having said that, it should not be very critical, very sarcastic might not make sense, because the evaluator might not appreciate it. So you never know. And that's why it's important to stay within the boundaries of what you would typically tell people. Let's say if you're addressing 100 people, right? You might not be able to be satirical throughout, because not everybody is going to get it. So that's why I'll say don't overdo it. Occasional use is fine. In quant, if I've managed to cut it down to 2 options, should I go with my gut, or is flukes not advisable? See, typically out of 20 questions in the QADI, if you have attempted 12, 13 plus correctly, you might take more risk. But if you have just got, let's say, 6 or 7 questions, right, then I don't suggest taking more risk. So if you are very clear that, okay, I've attempted 13, 14 questions, I'm getting all of those correct. Now there's a 15th question, I have a hunch that it's between A and B. That is maybe where you can take a shot. But if you are stuck in the lower attempt range, let's say you have attempted only 5 questions out of 20, taking risk for the 6th question might not make sense. Okay, I think I've answered pretty much all the questions related to MyCat. If there's anything else, feel free to ask me right now. Otherwise, we can wrap up the session here. Okay, so I think we're done. There were some questions related to NMAT, so I'm just going to take them a little later. But if there's anything related to MICA, you can ask me right now. Any place where we can practice psychometric questions. Oh, I've mentioned that in my this video, how to crack MyCat psychometric test and descriptive writing. It's there on IMS YouTube channel. I've given a link in the chat window as well. So in this particular workshop that I had done, I have given 4 sources from where you can practice free psychometric assessments. All right, I think that's about it. So thanks everyone for joining. I hope this session has helped, and wish all of you all the best for your MyCat 1 as well as MyCat 2.